What role are you seeing digital play in all of this? I mean, you talked about some of them, but what specifically are some of the tools? I mean, obviously your company builds one. And how are you seeing people use that and other tools to really find out where people's hearts are?
Well, I think maybe as in support of the tools, what we're doing is we're relying or choosing to incorporate much more sophistication behind how we process the information, right? So it's one thing to have wider open channels of communications with your employees, but if you're not prepared to collect it, analyze it, understand it, action upon it, you're going to be challenged. And so, for example, we've had a number of techniques for creating these, just again, open channels of communication. We're spending a lot more time applying, prevailing AI, machine learning, whether it be natural language processing, et cetera, to make sure that we're analyzing those channels faster and in more sophisticated ways. Employees want their voice to be heard now, but there's also some complexity right now. There's a lot of stress, right? There's a lot of drama. And, we talk a lot about the pandemic, but we have to recognize that in this time as well, we also have a significant push for diversity and inclusion, right? In many ways prompted as well by Black Lives Matter initiatives, et cetera. And so employees are not just wanting their voice to be heard, but they want their message to be understood. Yeah. And those messages can be complicated, especially if you're dealing with a big volume problem. And so it's easy to open up the techniques, right? The technologies of digital to gather the information, but you now have to move the sophistication to the next level.
And what's your advice to employees about how they can use technology to help themselves? I mean, one thing I see is people connecting on a much more human level, because in a funny way, we're all going to each other's homes these days.
Yeah, I just had the conversation earlier today when I suggested that line between that person at work and that person you understood existed somewhere at home, right, is now blurred, and that we are in fact interacting with people in this conflation between home and work. I think one of the things that we have to do is continue to demonstrate to employees that they can trust those technologies, that they can trust the company's use of them. One of the areas that we focused a lot on as a company is in the confidentiality associated with those direct lines of communication, right? So that we have our feedback loops at the employee's discretion can be completely anonymous, and giving us the ability to get their most authentic representation of their feedback in a trusted way. And so I do think that companies have to continue to demonstrate that they're willing to take not just the openness of the conversation, but the sensitivity of the conversation very seriously, and make sure that the employees see that they're implementing channels that protect them, that create an air of safety. Because if you do that, then it'll be less of a volume of engagement information. You're going to get quality because it's going to be authentic.
So it sounds like you're talking about using AI and ML to try to extract meaning from quantity, and then advocating going in depth to really drill in to understand quality. Am I understanding?
Yeah, I think that's right. There's clearly a role for basically human oversight of all of these processes. But today, it's easy to put your head down if you see that the volume's coming in, right? It's not uncommon for organizations who work with us to receive, tens of thousands of free text commentary as part of their feedback loops. And that just becomes an enormous volume problem. And so you're going to at least help that process and make that process easier by pre-analyzing or otherwise pre-screening the information to be able to help point you into areas that you want to go deeper, right? And so I don't think that the technology is at the point where it figures it all out for you, tells you exactly what to do, but it certainly is an enormous logistical assist to helping you get from feedback to insights and actionable direction as efficiently as possible.
So maybe a little bit differently is use that quantity to start to make sure you haven't missed anything and to find hotspots, and then you can go deep qualitatively on those hotspots.
Correct.
hot topics. Okay.
Exactly. And the key is, again, clarity and then speed of interpretation and response. Because ultimately, if the employees don't see the impact, right, of my voice matters because I see change, right, or I see at least verification, then the channel really starts to slow down, if not closes.
It's interesting. You remind me that the story where they changed the color of the walls to green and people's morale improved. And they concluded the green walls made an improvement. And then they changed it back to the old color and it also improved. So the conclusion was just, if people thought that you cared, their morale improved.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because, you know, we've been in this, as you said earlier, we've been in this business for 14 years. And so we understand very, very clearly that, you know, a single or a couple of data points a trend doesn't make, right? And so you have to be able to put all of this in perspective. And again, especially now with the just severe impact on the way the companies are operating, this is a bit of an anomalous time. But at the same time, you have to respond to it, right? And so again, in our business, people have historically thought of culture as a strategic consideration, and so they measured their approach to this, and meaning moving from insights to outcomes. They typically measured those timeframes in months or years. But now we're seeing, and this has again prompted us in terms of the way we've approached execution of our products and services. It's prompted us to literally adapt to these, you know, time-sensitive needs. And so that companies today are saying, I need to know this week what I need to be able to do next week, because the laws of the regulations have just changed, right? The government mandates have changed, and I now have to shift my business, but I have no idea what the current situation is, none of that, but I have no idea what I need to do to get there. And so we've literally adapted our approach, getting customers to understand how to use our products and services in ways that could get them literally from an uncertainty to an outcome in 48 hours. Even in all honesty, if it's imperfect, but it allows them, it prepares them so much better than they would have been before.
You're saying don't let perfection be the enemy of speed, and its speed is king.
I don't think the current conditions especially allow for perfection. They simply don't, right? There's so much uncertainty and imperfection in everything today anyway. But you know, you clearly have to have a bias for action, and you have to have a sincere and reasonable approach to how you gather information and how you translate that into actions.
And so it sounds like one of the key values with the digital technologies is to enable that speed, so that you can gather large amounts, look through it, come to reasonable conclusions, and take reasonable actions in short cycles.
Oh, completely. And again, if it's part of a strategy of continuous assessment and action, it allows you to make those adjustments along the way, right? So you can be adapting as you course correct, but you are at least moving forward.
And then, you know, what would you say is kind of a closing thought about ways, you know, advice that where you've seen companies coming up short, because you see across a whole large set of companies.
Right.
And so, you know, where are the places that you're seeing people missing the most opportunities? You'd say, look, this is the place that you need to, if you haven't looked here, you need to look here to make a difference for your business.
Sure. Well, it's a great question. For me, it's simple in the sense that you've got to be aware. So you've got to completely illuminate any blind spots you have in your organization right now. So the question unasked is just a potential problem unsolved, right? And so you've got to engage your employees. So you've got to be intentional about it. Don't be accidental. You simply just cannot wait this out, because there may have been seemingly a defined beginning, but the notion of some end point is just, it's elusive. And so you've got to keep moving. You've got to understand your organization to truly be able to know what actions are meaningful. This is not the time to assume. It's not the time to just, you know, trust, you know, historical conditions will prevail. It is a time to be proactive and intentional about it. And what we've seen that, you know, our products and services have affirmed the fact that this notion of employee engagement is very, very measurable, right? And it's translatable to effective company outcomes, right? And so companies that are, again, intentional about understanding that, right, both in terms of the engagement and the connection to outcomes, will be able to create the opportunity for themselves and be in control, more in control of their destiny than not.
Rich, thank you very much. This has been really, really interesting, and I think really relevant because so many people are struggling right now in so many ways, and so I think the capability of getting that feedback and taking action is crucial. For the larger audience, if you're passionate about digital transformation and interested in coming on the show, please email us at dtv@infostretch.com. We'd love to hear from you. And again, thank you, Rich. Enjoy seeing you as always.